think I have nothing to give but pain. Only I know you love pain. Hello everyone, with my favorite soundbite from Blade Runner 2047 starring Jared Leto and Harrison Ford. This is CM Kozeman continuing our big string of answers to a series of, well, frankly, phenomenal questions asked to me by my Patreon supporter, Marianne, and in a very insightful series of questions about art, life, maybe even some like personal intuitions such as dreams. She has been very kind also on Patreon by supporting me and by providing us these questions. So without much ado, let's go on with the answers to the third part of this probably 4-part series. Once again, if you're new to this channel, please also consider supporting our merch store, and there you can get a lot of cool t-shirts with this channel's logo on it. It's also a cool logo and it has no text on it, so you'll be dog whistling and no one will know you're actually repping Daddy Kozeman out there. So that's one thing you can get, and there will be many other stuff coming up. So yeah, check the merch store and also consider supporting me on Patreon. By supporting me on Patreon for as little as $1 per month, you will be able to not only ask questions like the ones Marianne has asked, in fact the link is just below and in the pinned comment, but you will also be able to see many new paintings and secret stuff that nobody else gets to see. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's take a sip of the good old Kozeman coffee and get cracking with Marianne's answers. Okay, now I think it won't be doxing to reveal that Marianne is a stained glass artist. So she's asking a more selfish questions. What are your thoughts about stained glass as a form of art? Did it ever influence you? Is there a lot of stained glass in Istanbul? And if so, how did it affect you? Okay, so right off the bat, stained glass vitri design alongside things like blacksmithing, and even though I don't like jewelry, jewel design and jewel smithing, these are things I have a huge amount of respect for because they're different from just picking up pens or brushes and just drawing and painting. And even if you invent your own way to paint, you can kind of like wing it and get on by. But with these traditional art forms, you actually have like many techniques that you seriously need to master. So they really need a lifetime of dedication. And I have the utmost respect for them, and like some examples of them, the stained glass art I have seen around the world, it's just beautiful and phenomenal. Unfortunately, in Istanbul, there's not much stained glass display as there is in Western countries, and these are more often than not connected with church glass designs, and they're just phenomenal and beautiful. I think just the whole knowledge of chemistry needed to create a specific shade of blue or orange or green in those panels is just fantastic. Let me just think in the places I lived. I was born not in Istanbul but in the town of Ankara, and the apartment I was born in, it still stands to this day. It's like nearly 70 years old now. The RER apartment, the RER apartment. It's in a certain neighborhood of Ankara, and long story short, there used to be these green glass panels in front of the windows that kind of filtered the sunset glare because the apartment living room faced west, and it was a fantastic vista. But as the sun went down, it went behind these green glasses, and this apartment still stands and the green glass sheets are still on the windows. And I always feel very sad and nostalgic whenever I pass by that place, by the way. So it feels very emotional. But this was one seminal effect a very primitive form of stained glass had on me as a child growing up. I always used to squint through the green glass and look at the orange sunset and imagine like creatures in the after images the sun left in my eyes. So there's one. In Istanbul, there are some churches belonging to the Catholic community that have stained glass displays. They're quite beautiful, but I've never looked at them with an artist's eye. Maybe I should actually. What else? There are lots of like these quaint little places like patisseries, bakeries, some restaurants that had these like very simple stained glass displays. So I'm talking about like maybe a door with like 3 different shades of glass on it, and those are beautiful. Also, I explored quite a bit of the city when I was, believe it or not, writing a 2-volume encyclopedia about Istanbul's vernacular architecture, basically. And sometimes they do these really cute things where if the apartment is called maybe Zümrüt Apartmanı, which is to say Jade Apartment, and another Istanbul deep lore is that every apartment building in the city has a name. So it's not like in, let's say, the US where it's like, I don't know, 32 Jerk-off Place, something like that. No, actually, every apartment has a name, and usually these are like colorful and evocative names. Deniz Sea is very common. Also natural names like, I don't know, like Çiçek Apartmanı, flowers, landscape features, whatever. So one of these apartments had the name Zümrüt, which is, I think, jade or jasper, I don't know. It's one of those green stones. And the entranceway of the apartment was very delicately decorated with these blue-green little glass panes. And it was just sweet and beautiful. So this is as far as stained glass influenced me in Istanbul. In some ways, Istanbul is very old, but in other ways, it's somewhat modern. So make of this what you will. And I don't know, there's certainly not many examples of stained glass art in the sophistication and mastery that Marian, the asker of these questions, practiced. Okay, does your religion or spiritual values influence your art? Oh my God, getting deep under the skin again. Or is it because it is so intricately mixed with the concept of culture and social identity that it enriches the world you create? Now, this is a very complicated question because I have my own cultural background. No matter how hard they try to like secularize it and kind of like pass us off as these sort of like just a word Western person kind of things. But I learned at an early age that there are only a few things more disgusting than people who deny their own background. You could be lapsed, I don't mind about that. But like whenever I meet Turkish people in Western cities and they just, some of them are just LARPing as Netflix characters, and it's just really a sad, sorry state of affairs. But on the other end of the spectrum, I don't like this cultural chauvinism either. You know, I don't like these people who walk around everywhere going out Türkiye, Türkiye to people's faces. I think it's another entirely different kind of gut reaction I have to those tropes, let me just say that much. But I think we are all immediately shaped and molded by the places where we are born, and only a small part of this is religion and culture. A lot of stuff comes from basically how your parents lived, how they cooked, where you went to school, how you went to school. So even things as mundane and specific as like, I don't know, the sound the bus makes when you click your bus pass, you know, those are also part of culture. There's little to be separated between modern, contemporary, everyday living culture and the sort of more mythical and let's say like deep culture. So everything influences me. As I just was talking about, you know, even colorful, dainty bits of glass in the entranceway of a modern apartment, that's a part of culture, that's inspiration. Now, owing to my personal family background, and I won't get too much into that, because basically there's a huge clandestine Sephardic element hiding in there, but so I did not absorb, nor grew up wanting to absorb a great majority of the religious culture inherent in Turkey, but I always respected it. I always liked it. You know, I think it's just something, you know, when you go outside, when you go to the Western world, you see that everybody here complains about, oh, we're bound by these chains, everybody is so conservative. Motherfucker, go out. Everybody out there is bound up with maybe not heavy clunking chains, but they're bound up with a dozen tiny little fish strings, these polystyrene fish strings, almost as tightly as you are bound with culture. And if you get the metaphor, make of this what you will. Okay, now that whole bit about culture aside, there is a lot of, I'm talking about my surreal paintings now, and obviously a lot of the inspiration filters there, with the colors and everything, with the sort of more stylistic, flat depiction of figures. I think it owes both to Ottoman art, but also the art of the Byzantines, and even before that, the art of, let's say, pre-Hellenistic Anatolia, whatnot with the Hittites and Lydians and Carians and all their interesting and eclectic cultures. I'm really inspired. In fact, one of the greatest things I like to do in Turkey is, even if you go to like the smallest little town or city, there's an archaeological museum. And if you follow my channel, there are lots of videos where I visit archaeological museums. And even in the smallest museum, there's these amazing treasures you would be hard pressed to find, say, in the Getty Museum or even the British Museum. So I love going to these museums with a sketch pad and just, photograph and sketch the bizarre stylized depictions of humans and animals there. And it's a real, like, fresh world of inspiration. And that's, I guess, how the latent culture of Turkey and its previous incarnations filters down to me. You see, for me, there's no difference between urban culture in Ankara and Istanbul, stuff like, I don't know, prostitute calling cards on the pavement. With that, there's no difference with, let's say, more culinary traditions or the heritage of the Ottomans or the heritage of the Byzantines or the heritage of the Seljukids, the Lydians, the Carians, the Hittites, the Hellenistic rulers. I don't look at Turkey's history from a single perspective of a present-day Turkish person, but you have to look at it in all its aspects. But one thing I sure as hell am not, is that I would never be one of these types who would kind of, I'm just so westernized, I don't even know what you're talking about. There are those like pale imitators, and I don't like those. Okay, so that's that question answered. Another question from Marianne: what is your personal experience with the Mevlevi order? What do you think about their way to achieve ecstasy? Okay, another complicated question. So let me just say, up until maybe 100 years ago, Turkey was home to lots of these mystical Islamic or quasi-Islamic syncretistic orders of belief, let us say, and these are called tarikats. And I think for quite based reasons, all of them were like kind of sweepingly shut down by Atatürk, Turkey's secular founding father. Because let's say if one of these tarikats was spreading an alternative way to look at the world or just be at peace with life, then there were 10 others who were like basically no different from these weird cults now you would see in the present day United States. Now, some of these are also making a comeback, but I won't even go there with a 40-foot pole. All I will say is that the Mevlevi order was one such tariqat, and their style of mystical ecstasy to join God, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not extremely well versed in this. Basically, they spin around for long periods of time and find a sort of ecstasy, and they have this kind of unique traditional music, and they were one of the few heterodox sects that the state allowed to basically exist, and as a result they have become very popular. Also as a tourist attraction. I mean, they go everywhere where the Turkish tourism department goes and promote Turkey's like sort of mystical heritage legacy. And some of that is real, but a lot of that is kind of astroturfed. But also the Mevlevis have like a genuine, deep-rooted historic foundation. If you go to the center of Istanbul, there's a district named Taksim, and in the very depths of this Taksim district, there's like a centuries-old mystical Mevlevi lodge. And I once went there, and it was really beautiful and interesting. But what I really liked was that this centuries-old place also had centuries-old pine trees in its yard. And some of these trees were dead. They were like so old, they just fell over. Nobody bothered lifting them. So I could like peel off the bits of decaying bark, and I found the hugest, most enormous millipedes and termites I could ever find in the city. And that was a memory that stood with me. And I guess from that you can kind of guess my approach to this whole thing. Unfortunately, it's not even part of my family heritage. It's something I deeply admire and respect, but do not practice in. So there are also some other like more splinter groups, sometimes based on the teachings of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, who basically espoused a sort of like vague, almost Unitarian version of heterodox Islam. And they basically said all is one, come whoever you are. I mean, really progressive kernels of thought constructed with whatever material that was available. Imagine you only had like Legos of a certain type, and with that you try to build an X-wing, and okay, it's close enough to present day concepts of human rights for government work, let's say. So there's those orders as well, but some of them are really mystical and woozy, and there are even some like ultra weird, like ultra heterodox sects that kind of merge the teachings of this Jalaluddin Rumi guy or Mevlana, the Mevlevi sect, with things like Jungian psychology, Freudian psychology, or even things like astral projection and spiritual beings. I mean, like the rabbit hole there has no end, and I don't know, I think it's like nice to have, but some of these things really suck people in, and I don't know if that's really fair. And I'll leave this at that. But yeah, Mevlevis are based, my takeaway. Okay, one more question from Marianne. Let me just take a bit of a break and eat some egg and cheese mash while you contemplate supporting this channel on Patreon. You know how to do this? You hard boil an egg, you take out the yellow bit, take out some white cheese, pour them all into a bowl, and then take a fork and just squash those motherfuckers together. What you get is a sort of orange, white, and yellow paste. It has the best bits of egg and cheese in it. And you could like mold it into any form and eat it like so I'm really enjoying some of that now. Yeah. Danny Kozman's egg and cheese bash. If you listen this far, please type I want the egg and cheese bash, Daddy Kozman, so I know that you've been listening, and I know we can join forces to beat the algorithm. Comments mean interaction, mean more viewers, and potentially more support for me to continue doing this channel. So yeah, I want the egg and cheese mash, Daddy Kozman. Type that thing down below. Okay, let me just drink some coffee too. It's kind of hard to keep talking non-stop, huh? Who would have think? Okay, one big question from Marianne. What is your take on E.O. Wilson's views on humans as the poetic species? He says both rely on forms of metaphor and analogy because they share the brain's strict and peculiar limitations in the processing of information. Both are examples of under-examined terrain. This is an excerpt from E.O. Wilson's book, I'm guessing, but both, it says, but both humans and what? We'll find out. Continuing the quote, both are explorers of under-examined terrain. A key difference is that an artist, at the moment of the spark ignites, does not press on towards natural law and self-dissolution within the big picture. All the artist's skills are aimed at the instant transference of images and the control of emotions in others. Okay. He carefully avoids exact definitions or the display of inner logic. The poetic mind is not satisfied with a concrete description, but seeks to amplify passions and exaggerate thoughts. Well, let's do some more digging, by the way, because I need to get a better handle on this E.O. Wilson guy. Oh, he's this very famous biologist who did this groundbreaking work on ants. I actually have, believe it or not, I have his huge encyclopedia on ants, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. But beyond just really like writing the book about ants, Edward Osborne Wilson, born in 1929, died in 2021. He has written a lot about sociobiology, evolution, the human mind. I'm not as well versed in these writings as I should be, but I think he had a debate or disagreement with Richard Dawkins, which is kind of based. So let's see, look at the poetic. I wonder if this is the same E.O. Wilson though as the poetic species. Okay, let's look at that. Oh, I wish I was better prepared, but don't worry. Okay, so it's from this book, The Poetic Species, a conversation with legendary sociobiologist E.O. Wilson, and I must read this book. But I think from the gist of what Marianne is referring, basically there's something in human intelligence where most people, or maybe some people, have this way to amplify other people's thoughts by crafting works of art or other symbols, really. Like, I mean, a song could be it or something. I kind of sense this in myself, but I don't know if this sense is strong enough to like define myself as a like poetic mind or something. I'm kind of skeptical whenever somebody in the sciences comes up with a sweeping way to generalize human intelligence or types of intelligence or types of people. I'm always a bit skeptical, but taken at prima facie level, the things quoted by Marianne from Wilson's Poetic Species book I think it's quite legit. There are ways to be an artist though. Like if you're an artist who just panders to, like if you're one of these people who draw like Funko Pops and stuff, I think you're gonna be exploring that terrain a little less. And I think the kind of art I respect and enjoy and try to do is the kind of art in which you're honest. There are no like pretentious takes. You just draw or paint what you feel like drawing or painting. I also noticed this in the best artists, who are the uneducated, sometimes mentally challenged artists, the so-called outsider artists, who just, I mean, you always must have heard like this guy lives in a cave and just paints one figure on the walls over and over again, things like this. I think this is something I really respect, because it's like, so as you grow older, one of the things that you end up hating the most is that everything in life seems to fall towards a sort of logical calculus. And you see these in like the way people marry, you see these in people's job and life choices. Like every choice is made to like maximize value and future safety, and to some degree there's no getting around this, and it's just like it's one of the most dark and disillusioning things you face as you grow older. So if you're young, keep your eyes peeled. I mean, when you're young, you feel like, yeah, I could, I don't know, emigrate to this mountain town in Czechia and just draw reptile hentai. But look back 10 years later and you're like, oh, I may go to a holiday once, but I need to pay the bills. So yeah, it's an inevitable evil that life has put us into. What I'm getting at is like these people like outsider artists, or like some of these like outright maniacs who creatively ruin their lives, they're actually doing extremely brave things by going against the grain of the flow of life. And I really admire and respect this thing where like you have every opportunity to be a great lawyer, you went to a great school, but you choose to do something else. Why? Because you want to be the master of your fate. You don't want to go along with the most prudent choice. And I've tried to buck this trend as much as I could in my personal life. Maybe not hard enough, I don't know. But as you get older, you feel this, and if this pain hurts you, act on it. That's all I could say. Because the nice thing about life is like, unless you try really hard, I don't know, like, I mean, you drop out of a Fortune 500 job and start shooting heroin under a bridge, unless you like do something really damaging to yourself, it's actually really hard to get things wrong. Life is a generative adventure, like a fractal, and if you make one life-changing move, the rest of life reciprocates and grows around you from there on. Of course, this being said, it's easier to say than do. As the Turkish saying goes, bekara karı boşamak kolay, which is a metaphorical way of saying like talk is cheap. But basically, I mean, if you have kids, or like if you like need to support people in your life, or if you're just accustomed to creature comforts, then it becomes increasingly harder to make these choices. And so anyways, I'm not unhappy though. I have my artwork and I have you guys, so there's one nice thing. Okay, a last question from Marianne is, wow, like one that really slams hard. Apart from creating beauty and earning a living, does your art serve other purposes? So yes, I'm sometimes lucky enough to sell paintings. Also, like, if you like this channel, consider buying a painting from me. You just get in touch with me from Patreon, or go to my website at cmkozman.com, go to the gallery section, the fine art section there. All kinds of stuff you can buy. But when that happens, it's kind of a like nice windfall, and I always save that money or like channel it to more like, let's say, pressing concerns. But so there's one thing art is good for me. Another thing is like, basically I want to create things that are beautiful. I think maybe another purpose it might serve in the long run is that, well, after I get old and like die, basically, I would have left a legacy which people will look at, think about, ponder, maybe value and cherish. And I just think that's nice. And with that, we reach the end of Marianne's amazing profound question session. Thank you once again for these amazing questions, Marianne. If you, dear viewers, want to ask me similar questions, please do so. The link to the next Q&A session is in the pinned comment, so just go there, subscribe to me on Patreon, and ask on. And as always, thanks for listening, and wherever you are, have a nice day. This has been CM Kozeman. Goodbye.